The U.S. State Department quietly edited its Taiwan page, deleting lines such as Taiwan is part of China and the United States does not support Taiwan independence. The move has, of course, not gone unnoticed. China said the edits were an act of political manipulation of the Taiwan question, and the attempt to change the status quo across the Taiwan Strait will hurt the U.S. itself. In response, the U.S. insisted its Taiwan policy has not changed and China should not manufacture pretenses to increase pressure on Taiwan. Is China's concern much ado about nothing? Why did the U.S. edit the page at this juncture then? What might come next? I'm pleased to be joined from Washington, D.C. by John Sitilides, a global risk analyst, and from Beijing by Victor Gao, chair professor at Soochow University. Gentlemen, welcome to The Point. So just a bit of details as to the changes on the U.S. State Department website. The original website, the very first paragraph actually says the U.S. and Taiwan enjoy a robust unofficial relationship. The 1979 U.S. PRC, meaning the People's Republic of China, joint communique switched diplomatic recognition from Taipei to Beijing. In the joint communique, the U.S. recognized the government of the People's Republic of China as the sole legal government of China, acknowledging the Chinese position that there is but one China and Taiwan is part of China. Now, that complete paragraph is gone among the other changes. And the new website begins with this sentence, which says, as a leading democracy and technological powerhouse, Taiwan is a key partner in the Indo-Pacific. The two sides share similar values, deep commercial and economic links, and strong people-to-people ties, which form the bedrock of our friendship and serves as the impetus for expanding U.S. engagement with Taiwan. So it doesn't have the specific emphasis on the People's Republic of China being the sole legal government representing China. And later on in the new version, it gives a fleeting mention of the three communiques without mentioning any specifics. It says, though the U.S. has no diplomatic relations with Taiwan, we have a robust unofficial relationship and an abiding interest in maintaining peace and stability in the Taiwan Strait. So here are what the changes are all about. Victor, let me go to you first. As to why the changes and exactly what they are, U.S. State Department spokesperson Ned Price said, all we have done is update a fact sheet, and that's something that we routinely do with our relationships around the world. Do these changes look like routine update of a fact sheet to you?
Thank you very much for having me. First of all, allow me to mention that whatever the State Department has amended its policies on China and the situation across the two sides of the Taiwan Strait cannot change the fact that there is only one China and Taiwan is part of China. Now, the so-called amendments you just now mentioned reveal the fact that the United States had the tongue in the cheek, or had at least half of the tongue in the cheek, because it wanted to mislead the world as to what exactly its policy about China, its policy about the two straits relations are. The reality cannot be overturned by such amendments. What drives the United States changes in the policy, I believe, is the fact that they really want to add more fuel to the tension, if any, in the relations across the two sides of the Taiwan Strait. They want to leave no stone unturned to push for the so-called Taiwan independence, which is a dead end in itself. And it even does not care if such continued provocation may lead to a confrontation between the two sides of the Taiwan Strait. So I think the United States is deliberately ambiguous in the expectation that they can really lead to the change of the status across the two sides of the Taiwan Strait. The mega threat is that there is only one China and Taiwan is part of China. The United States originally acknowledged this. They still acknowledge this despite of all the changes they want to make to the so-called situations across the two sides of the Taiwan Strait.
Okay, the United States actually said these changes do not reflect any change in their One China policy, which is guided by the Taiwan Relations Act, the 6 assurances, and of course the 3 communiques. But the 3 communiques, of course, are recognized by China as well as the bedrock of bilateral ties. But the Taiwan Relations Act and the 6 assurances are domestic legislations which China have called invalid and illegal. Now, but they're not new. President Biden actually mentioned this before after his virtual meeting with Chinese President Xi Jinping last November. This time, have it written down on the official webpage of the State Department. John, let me go to you. What kind of a difference does it make? What does the United States want to say or want to do?
Well, let's go over several of the issues that are raised in your question and, of course, in my colleague and Victor Gao's comments as well. First of all, the State Department does routinely update its website and fact sheets on every country in the world. So these are routine updates, but what I think is happening here is based on a number of factors where the State Department feels that Beijing is not correctly interpreting the U.S. position regarding relations between China and Taiwan. And of course, the United States acknowledges China's claims to Taiwan, but it doesn't recognize them or accept them. So we have fundamentally different interpretations of international law, international agreements, and of course, the One China policy. And I think there's a larger background here as well in that President Xi Jinping in January of 2019 gave a very important speech that was essentially aimed at the Taiwanese people and the Taiwanese government, stating that it was, of course, his hope, as it had been for prior Chinese leaders, that Taiwan and China would be unified peacefully, but that China reserves the right to use force to reunify Taiwan from a Chinese perspective by 2049 at the latest. So that's been very concerning for Washington since that speech was given. And then, of course, with what's happening with the war in Ukraine, and Russia's view of Ukraine as an entity that does not deserve to exist as a sovereign, separate, independent nation is, in the eyes of many intelligence officials in Washington, causing Beijing to recalculate its position towards Taiwan. And so I think there's an effort in Washington to help China better understand what the U.S. position is and will be going forward.
But John, based on what you just said, China never, I have no knowledge that the Chinese leadership had made the hint or suggestion that there's a deadline for reuniting with Taiwan by 2049. Never have I heard anything. These are probably speculation, interpretation, because China does not rule out the use of force because there is a legislation which clearly stipulates under which circumstances force will be used as a last resort. But as to the date 2049, I don't know where that came from.
There have been other proclamations by President Xi and by the Chinese Communist Party of the Great Rejuvenation, and that dream involves the total, quote-unquote, reunification of China as it's perceived in Beijing. That includes Taiwan. So it's part of the Great Chinese Dream. It's part of the Chinese rejuvenation. And the concern, of course, from the U.S. is that the position on Taiwan has been that if China and Taiwan are to be unified, it's through peaceful means only. But in the meantime, we want to preserve the status quo in the Taiwan Straits and to see to it that efforts to undermine peace and stability are deterred.
Victor, what is your reaction to the points that John raised just now?
Well, first of all, I hope the United States will face up to the matter that really matters. That is, whether across the 2 sides of the Taiwan Strait, there are 2 countries or 1 country. That's the most fundamental question. Now, if you agree that there is 1 country, that is China, by whatever name you call it, then you will come to the logical conclusion that Taiwan is not a sovereign country. Taiwan is part of China. Now, if the United States is right to apply its policies with regard to Ukraine, defending the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Ukraine, they should apply the same principle to China, because China is a sovereign country. Part of China is what we call Taiwan, and anyone which sabotages the sovereignty and territorial integrity of China will be treated as an enemy of China, as an enemy of the Chinese nation. That's the simple fact. Now, whether the Chinese mainland and Taiwan will be united, when it will be united, by which means it will be united, it has nothing to do with the United States. It's purely a domestic internal matter among the Chinese people on the two sides of the Taiwan Strait.
Okay.
So if the United States push for the situation that the two sides will remain permanently separated, that will be against the megatrend of our time.
John, your reaction?
Again, it's a fundamental difference of interpretation as to the situation between China and Taiwan. The United States considers Taiwan to be an entity of undetermined sovereignty. So that's the U.S. position. It has been and will likely remain so.
But the United States had it in its website, as I said, it deleted now. It had it in its website that the 1979 joint communique switched diplomatic recognition from Taipei to Beijing. In the joint communique, the U.S. recognized the government of the People's Republic of China as the sole legal government of China. It doesn't say it does not respect, it does not recognize this fact anymore. It still mentions the joint communique. So the U.S. says it does not support Taiwan independence. So I don't know, how do you explain that? The U.S. has not changed its official position then.
But that's correct what you're stating here, Shin. The U.S. does not call for Taiwan's independence, and actually part of U.S. policy regarding this issue has been to dissuade Taiwan from seeking to achieve independence, because we know that this is a basis for conflict in the region. So there's basically a dual purpose here in Washington's policy on the issue. A, to deter China from invading an entity that the U.S. considers to be of undetermined sovereignty, so that if there is to be unification, it's to be resolved peacefully between the governments of China, the People's Republic of China, and the Republic of China, the official name that Taiwan gives itself, and also to dissuade Taiwan from seeking independence. The U.S. position is essentially to support the status quo. We see now Taiwan as a liberal, free market democracy. Again, in the statement that you read, as a technology powerhouse, a semiconductor superpower that has a very different place in the world today than it did in 1979. So the official policy is the same, essentially. There's been a clarification on the State Department website, but the situation in Taiwan has become more precarious because there's a sense that under President Xi, China has taken on a more ambitious and potentially belligerent policy towards Taiwan.
Allow me to add a point. John, with due respect, I hope you and the American friends and colleagues will never use the word invade applying to Chinese mainland's invasion of Taiwan, because if you use invasion as the term, you will need to call President Lincoln and the Union soldiers storming into the southern part of the United States declaring independence as invasion. No, it's not invasion. It's really liberating the southern part of the United States, which declared a confederacy. The United States ever since then has been a nation under God, indivisible. This is how and why the United States, the American people, have ranked President Lincoln as one of the greatest presidents of the United States. Now, for China, whether you call it the People's Republic of China or the Republic of China, there is only one China. You can say that the two sides of the Taiwan Strait have never been subjugating one to the other. That's a fact. But they all belong to China. They are part of China. There is only one sovereignty, that Chinese sovereignty.
Many thanks. We have to leave it there. John Sitilides joining us from DC and Victor Gao joining us from Beijing.